Hello and welcome to this game review. So in this one, Black made some big strategical mistakes, and they are quite interesting to see, as after the opening, Black ended up in quite a bit of trouble. So we have the Caro-Kann variation, and after the two knights, we're giving up the light squared bishop. So here we have to understand a few things. White has the bishop pair, which means a few things. Firstly, he has a light squared bishop, so he would like to play on the light squares. Generally, he wants the light squares to open up, new light squares diagonals to open up, etc. Which means that as we have only the dark squared bishop and no light squared bishop, someone has to look at the light squares. So this should be the pawn chain. We should put the pawns generally on light squares so that they control this bishop. And we should keep them there unless we're getting something in return for pushing them. The other thing is that if white is able to activate this bishop, well, he will have a big advantage. So bishop e2, bishop c5. So this is one way to develop. Now d4 is not allowed. And after castles, black plays knight d7 and decides on pawn d4. But unfortunately, this gives up the light squares. So black is trying to play for the dark squared strategy, but this doesn't really work, as we have this dark squared bishop, which turns out to be a bad piece in the structure because now it doesn't have this diagonal, so there's not that much to do. If you want to play like this, there are different ways to approach this. For example, knight f6, let's say d3, this is one of the moves. Bishop b4, if we are able to exchange the dark squared bishops, one example being this structure can arise in one or another way. This would make sense. If black has time to put his pawns on dark squares, he will have good control of the dark squares, and the white will not be able to open up his own bishop. So this is kind of the correct dark square strategy if this is what we are aiming for. We should get rid of our bishop. But now that we have the bishop, it turns out to be a bit misplaced. And now, knight e7, we should probably first castle, and as you mentioned, the black plan is usually to play with f5 somewhat dynamically, and this turns out to be quite good for black. And again, in the opening, the point is to develop the pieces and fight for the center. But after this, unfortunately, we're not really fighting for the center, as we are losing the control over the e4 square as well as the c4 square. So white plays knight b1, and the knight gets rerouted here. Even though we got a tempo, we can't really do much with this tempo if we don't have much of a way to open up the position. And also we are down in development, as white has 4 pieces developed, we have only 2. Okay, knight d7, queen g3, knight g6, and now queen c7, black is kind of developing. And now after a3, black made 2 very big decisions. So firstly, a5. So this makes sense to stop b4. So I guess we're going to take space on the queen side. If we're playing a move such as a5, this usually means that we should play on the queen side. This is also what the structure entails, as we have taken space with the d4 pawn. So we generally should play in King's Indian style with c4. But as you can see, since we don't have a light squared bishop, it will be very difficult to play the move c4 at any point. Now knight d2, and here black plays h5. So first a5, now h5, and this has a very big problem, which I'm not sure you realized, but the problem is the king. Where is the king going now? As we still haven't castled. At this point, we could castle both short and long, depending on what you want to do. But after this, it seems that in either case, our king is going to be weak, either because of this pawn, because of this pawn. So now we have kind of lost castling rights, and now the king will be left in the center. Sheriff probably castled kingside, and white is doing quite fine because our knight on g6 is badly placed, the bishop is badly placed, and we don't have much in the way of counterplay. The opponent has the 2 bishops, so he will start to play on the light squares. Eventually, the bishop can, for example, go to e4 at some point, for example, like this. Bishop f3, bishop e4, and it will be a strong unopposed piece. Also, this knight always asks for h4, which is also very annoying. Now we can't play h5. So h5, knight f3. So white doesn't play e5, which is a bit more concrete, getting the knight to a better square, or the bishop here as well, starting to point out the weak light squares, for example on g6, the knight is not very stable. Instead, knight f3, and this allows black to continue his dark square strategy. Now after h4, which is a good move, now black is controlling the square on g3, which black goes to use. Knight f6, and here for some reason black doesn't play knight h5. This is clearly the move that we must play, because if we get a blockade on the dark squares, then it will kind of make sense, our play up until here. As we put the pawn on d4, we're trying to control the dark squares. Also, we have less space, so piece exchanges are good. After this, white kind of has to take, otherwise, if he plays some random move, knight g3 looks very annoying. This is already quite a good piece. White's queen is out of play, and we have certain threats of, for example, f5 at some point, opening up the position. Of course, we will castle at some point. But knight h7 was played for some reason, and again here, if white has to take, then now at least he has lost the bishop pair. So now our biggest problem is gone. White doesn't have a very easy way to develop on the king side. For example, if e5, now there are certain new squares, and after knight e7, we can go to these dark squares that we are trying to control. Well, if white doesn't have the light squared bishop, there is not too much to worry about. So knight h7, and the black even got a second chance to play knight h5. This is a very hard decision to not make, right? The knight should definitely go to h5 at some point. Okay, knight h7, now white exchanges, and now this knight is bad, this rook is bad, our king is also stuck in the center, and white can slowly prepare e5 or f5 or both. The bishop can go to e4, and if we don't have a way to use these squares, then there wasn't too much point in getting these squares. So bishop d2, a4, and again we see the problem with the king. It's not clear how we are developing the king. King h1, white makes some useful moves, and now finally white plays b3. So if the pawn was on a7, this wouldn't be much of a problem. Black decides to give up a pawn. The situation is already quite difficult. He could go for some kind of pawn down endgame with e5, for example. Point being that if f5, we can put a knight on f4, again using the dark squares, and white can win a pawn here if he likes. But here, for example, we could even exchange queens, and now that we have an opposite colored bishop situation, we will have quite a strong bishop. We have a lot of control over these dark squares, so black is in no way worse, as white will never be able to use his central pawns. Instead knight e7, but this is a bit passive. Now white takes a pawn. It's not so much about the pawn, but that the a file is open, and also he can use it to open up more things. So from here, the game was lost without much of a fight, as white played quite well. Again, we should look for some kind of active counterplay when we see that things are going wrong. c5 was played, but now we have more positional problems. Now the b5 square is weak, and this bishop is forever alone on a7. After bishop d2, yeah, there's not too much to see here. White just attacks on the queen side. Well, we can't really do much on the king side, as we have less space. And all the while, remember when we played d4, this makes us have more space on the queen side. So this is where we should have played all along. But in the end, it is white who plays on the queen side and takes all of our pieces. So quite an unfortunate game. And generally, we shouldn't really put pawns on dark squares if we don't have a light squared bishop, because this means that we will not have anyone to protect the light squares. Also later we had the chance to again fight for the dark squares, as this is kind of our whole point, and this move knight h5 would more or less force white to part with his unopposed light squared bishop, after which we will not have as many problems. So hopefully this makes sense, hopefully this was useful, and see you next time.